Welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart, where we tackle the real, messy, and often uncomfortable sides of mental health. I'm MommaFoxFire, and as always, I'm here to create a space where we can have honest conversations, share raw experiences, and hopefully come out of it all feeling a little stronger and a little less alone. Today's episode is an exploration of something that impacts so many people in so many different ways, and that's religion and mental health. Whether you grew up in a religious household, found your faith later in life, or have chosen a completely different path, religion can play a significant role in shaping how we view ourselves, our relationships, and our place in the world. For some, it's a source of comfort and stability. For others, it can feel restrictive, overwhelming, or even damaging. We're not here to bash anyone's beliefs or praise one path over another. This is about acknowledging the complexities of how faith, or the lack of it, intersects with mental health. Studies show that for many, being part of a religious community can reduce feelings of isolation and provide a sense of purpose. But we also know that the pressures, expectations, and sometimes judgment that can come with religion can take a toll on mental health, especially when people feel like they're not measuring up. My guest today is Larry Camp, someone who knows this struggle intimately. Larry was raised in the Mormon faith and spent decades as a devoted member, but his journey took a turn when he began questioning what he was taught. He'll share how his experiences with religion shaped his mental health, his decision to leave the church, and how he's found a new sense of balance and purpose since then. Larry's story isn't just about religion. It's about resilience, community, and navigating life's ups and downs while staying true to yourself. He speaks openly about grief, judgment, and guilt, but also about hope, family, and finding new ways to thrive. I think you'll appreciate his insights, whether you're someone who has left a faith, is struggling with your own beliefs, or just wants to understand how religion impacts mental health. As always, I want to hear from you. What's your experience with religion and mental health? Has it been a source of strength? Has it been a challenge? Has it been a mix of both? Connect with me on social media, drop a comment, or send me a message. I'm MommaFoxFire everywhere. Your stories and perspectives are so valuable, and this podcast is about building a community where we can all learn and grow together. Let's get into it. Here's my interview with Larry Camp, where we explore his journey through faith, loss, and finding peace on his own terms. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome back to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. Oh, I just remembered one thing that I forgot, and that should be it right there. And we should be good. We are live here today on this wonderful Monday, and we're going to be talking through Larry Camp's mental health journey. If you have any questions for our guest tonight, we do have a question queue open. Feel free to pop a question into the question queue with the command !Q. Follow that with your question, and we'll make sure to get it addressed while we are here together. But I'm really excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be a pretty broad, wide-ranging conversation, and those are some of my favorite conversations. It's just where we go into everything. So Larry, thank you so much for joining us here today and just taking the time out of your evening.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be pretty broad because I got a lot of different things we can talk about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Larry, and then we're going to dive right in. So Larry Camp is a lifelong lover of Hawaii, music, and baseball. Raised in a Mormon family in Southern California, he went on a 2-year mission and attended Brigham Young University, where he studied communications. After a brief first marriage, he met his wife, Judy, with whom he shared over 4 decades. They raised 3 children and lived in multiple states, eventually settling in Arizona. Larry spent 22 years in the quick oil change business, but always nurtured a deep connection to Hawaii, where they often vacationed, and later moved for a few years, which I definitely want to talk about. In 2016, Larry began to question his Mormon beliefs after reading church essays, leading him and his family to leave the faith. Tragedy struck when his son Dusty passed away, which deeply impacted the family, especially his other son, Crosby. To cope, Larry started the podcast Nobody Knows Your Story, where he shares life experiences with others. And now Larry enjoys life in southern Utah with Judy, playing softball, traveling, and spending time with their 3 grandchildren. And if you are looking to connect with Larry, I have a link to his website, a link to his podcast that I just mentioned, and a link to his book, which we're going to talk about. Let me post those to both Twitch and YouTube. We are live on both. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to pop them in. Felix, I see your comments. Larry, you're getting some compliments already. They say you're looking pretty good. So we'll get this stuff in there, and there's those connection points for you. So you have, as I just mentioned, lots of hobbies, from traveling to sports to music and, of course, family. Were you always able to make time for hobbies in your life?
Yeah, pretty much. My parents were big into music, and anybody who knows anything about the Mormon church has probably heard of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Both of my parents sang in that choir. So I'm just saying that because we always had music in our home. I didn't gravitate to that kind of music. I was more into rock and roll, and still am. I mean, I've been to 180 plus concerts. So, I mean, music's been a big part of my life. So I guess that's a hobby. Girls have always been a hobby since I was like 11 years old. Baseball, softball, big time into my life. Hawaii, the beach, the ocean. So, and yeah, now as I'm older, I think you naturally turn towards family a little bit more when your kids are having kids, and so I do have some grandchildren now, and but yeah, I still have passions for all those things I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's nice to grow up where kind of music as a hobby is encouraged. I feel like sometimes we take our hobbies a little too seriously because it's like, oh, you want to sign up for this and this and this and this and this. And I found that it's important to have hobbies as a parent also, to have your own hobbies. But sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's hard to make time for that. But it sounds like you've been able to really prioritize that, which is great.
Yeah, and I've always liked to be involved in doing things. I mean, you can only watch so much Netflix, right? So I am still working, but more, I guess, on my schedule and my terms. So I do a little real estate. I still manage a condo over on the island of Maui. I do the podcast. I like to, and I'm on a traveling softball team. So, last year we played in Florida, Las Vegas, Arizona. We play all over. So I just played last week in Arizona, and next month we're in Las Vegas again. And then we'll be back in Arizona in November. So it does give me something to do and to look forward to, because when we're not playing in those tournaments, well, we're practicing, and we practice 2-3 days a week. So it's good to have those things, because you don't want to retire and not have hobbies. You need to have things to do.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I was just talking about my dad the other day and how many things he has going on, and he retired, and I think he's more busy now than he ever was when he was working. So he's constantly got a project. He's always been a projects guy though. So that's, yeah.
Yeah. And we've always, my wife and I both have always belonged to gyms. We've always done, been active. And even now, I mean, I walk 6 days a week. Anywhere, I have about 8 different routes. So I go anywhere from like 2.5 miles to 7 miles, depending on how much energy I feel that day, or if I have a good podcast I'm listening to.
Yeah. Hey, that makes a big difference. Either the music you're listening to or the podcast you're listening to makes a huge difference.
Yes, it does.
So Bite Mark has a question for you, and that is, what is your favorite poem?
My favorite poem? Well, that's interesting. So that would be Invictus. And I don't know if you can see it. I'll try and hold my arm here. Let me move my camera a little. I'm going to hold my arm up here. And if you can see this.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the last 2 lines of Invictus. And it says, I am the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. And that poem was memorized by my father-in-law. And I heard him recite it a number of times over the years before he passed away. And it was so important to him that my son Crosby memorized it and said it at my father-in-law's funeral.
Oh, wow.
And I think leaving organized religion, where I always had somebody else that was kind of this intermediary between me and a higher power. Now that I don't believe that anymore, I consider myself a hopeful agnostic. And So I do believe now it's remember the old thing, the old saying, if it is to be, it's up to me. That's kind of how I feel. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. So
Yeah.
if things are going to happen, it's on me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and it's a pretty short poem too. So if anybody's interested, I just posted a link to it. So you're welcome to go on there and read it and everything. But yeah, it's great whenever a literary work impacts you so much you're willing to put it onto your body. Like that says something of the power of just words and the power of what that is that's being put onto the paper, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a talking point. I mean, when people see it, they go, hey, what's that? And so then it gives me a chance to talk about it a little bit, which I like doing. When my son passed away, I put his name right here on my wrist. Mm-hmm. And same thing. People will be like, hey, what does that say? And then I can talk about my son a little bit. So
yeah. I have 2 tattoos on my arms. I have one. This one is a handlebar mustache. And people ask about it all the time. And I jokingly say, like, you've activated the trap because now we get to talk about men's breast cancer, this one's for my grandfather. And then I have another one, which is a fire axe. And that one's for my other grandfather. And I'm like, great, now we get to talk about suicide awareness. Like, so it's funny how it just becomes this conversation. And it's so quick. It's like, oh, I love that tattoo. Is that a handlebar mustache? And it's just like, tell the men in your life to go get checked because men's breast cancer is a thing, or, check in with your friends because suicide is invisible until it's not. So, yeah, I love tattoos as conversation pieces. I'm here for.
Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of been really, I got my first tattoo back in the 90s. So, I mean, but it's really gotten popular probably the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great. It used to be kind of like, oh, bikers, the only ones with tattoos. But you know what? Everybody's got tattoos now. So,
yeah.
And I think, you can get if I would have got one when I was 18, I'd probably have Grand Funk Railroad on my arm right now, because that was a band I listened to back when I was a teenager. But I told my kids, just wait till you're 25 before you get a tattoo, because if you're 25, 30, 35, you're probably going to be fine with whatever you get when you're 50 or 60.
Yeah.
And funny thing is, of my 3 children, none of them have gotten a tattoo.
Look, I support if you are going to make a major life decision, do it after you're 25. You don't know anything before you're 25. You absolutely just don't know anything. Don't make major decisions before then. I mean,
not only that,
pick your major.
Now we know our brains aren't. Yes, and our brains aren't even fully developed until we're 25.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what they're telling us.
Exactly. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Growling says all I got on my arm is roses are red, violets are blue. I got real drunk and got this tattoo. I support even that tattoo. Whatever you want on your body, man, just do it. I think it's great.
Yeah, there's a talking point.
Yep. Bite Mark says, I'm so glad we're moving away from judging tattoos and colored hair as a society. I can't wait for colored hair to be allowed in a professional setting. Like, I can't wait for that to be ultra allowed. I work with a lot of government services. And so even still now, you can't have unnaturally colored hair, which is so silly. If you can't rent a car, don't get a tattoo. Yeah, if you're not old enough to rent a car, that's good. Excellent.
So, and then you talk about the colored hair and the tattoos. It's like there's a lot of things in life that I think sometimes as we just live and we gain experience with time. I mean, I'll be honest. I used to be a lot more judgmental when I was a very religious follower of a high demand religion, because, you think you got all the answers and everybody else is wrong, and you become kind of judgmental. And so I think it's, I've copied this phrase, and I got it from my wife, who got it from one of her people she likes. I don't know if it was Maya Angelou or Oprah, but it's know better, do better. And that's kind of how I feel. I mean, I have made lots of mistakes in my life, but I can't change that except to not repeat them.
Yep. Oh, I love that. I love that sentiment of just like, and just the allowance of like, you're allowed to have been wrong in the past. You're allowed to change your opinion based on new information. I think a lot of the time we get so caught up in saying like, no, you said this one time. And it's like, okay, but what have I said since then? And yes, I said that one thing, but I was wrong. That's an okay response to that. Which is still sometimes hard to justify in some cases, but I think it's great that we're moving towards that a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah, and I love what you said there, that you're allowed to change your opinion based on new information.
Yep.
And I mean, that's why I'm no longer Mormon.
Yep. That's why I'm no longer Baptist.
There you go.
Yep. So Tib has a question, and they said, I think Mama has introduced you as ex-Mormon and now moved back to Utah. Has it been particularly difficult not to be a part of the Mormon community there? I'm assuming that's what you're brought up in. I thought about moving to Utah once and felt like I wouldn't find community and belonging.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we moved here in 2018, and when we started looking at homes in 2017, because we moved back from the island of Maui over in Hawaii, and that's one of the first things I asked my real estate agent. I said, can I live here as a non-Mormon? Because, I know that in the past, especially where I am in this community, it was like 80% Mormon. And so he said, you know what, 15 years ago, I would have told you, no, don't come. But now you'll be fine. He says, we've had so many people moving in over the last 15 years that it's still probably 60% Mormon, but my street, if it's an example of the way it's going, I mean, the people next door to me moved here a few years ago from Atlanta. They've never been Mormons. The people on the other side of me came from New Mexico, never been Mormons. People across the street came from Wyoming, never been Mormons. So, and yes, we do have some Mormons on the street, but everybody gets along fine. Nobody's too pushy. When they first got here and they asked about it, I just said, hey guys, we used to be, but we're not anymore. But we're good people.
Yeah.
I think just in time they see that. So yeah, that was definitely a concern, in the beginning, but we've actually met a lot of great friends. We've made great friends that are in the same boat as us, people who used to be Mormon, but aren't anymore. There's a lot of them here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say there aren't good people who are Mormon still, like that, there's good people all around.
Yeah, my whole family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
If we're unwilling to allow grace for past mistakes, no one can ever grow. Y'all know I love to say the phrase, you got to give people the grace and the space. And it's exactly what it's for. It's for that growth. It's for that allowance of being human. Because that's what it is. All right, I want to talk a little bit about you living in Hawaii, because it sounds so fabulous. I know there are some drawbacks, though. So what were your favorite and least favorite things about moving to and living in Hawaii?
I'll give a little bit of backstory. When I was a young boy, I would watch these game shows with my grandmother, and a lot of times they'd win a trip to Hawaii. That'd be the big prize. Yeah. And so I remember turning to my grandmother one time when I was 5 or 6 years old saying, someday I'm going to live there. And she just like pat my head. Oh, that's nice. She'd never even been on an airplane. So, I mean, it just seemed like such a dream. But at the age of 18, my family went to Hawaii, and we spent a month in some ramshackle place that they tore down like 2 years later on the north shore of Oahu. And I just loved it. I mean, they opened the door to the plane. This is back before you went down the walkways. This is where they put stairs up to the planes and you walk down them. And so, I mean, but they opened that door and that humid air. I mean, it's the little things. And then just that aloha spirit, which is even now when people say, what is it that you really love about Hawaii? I'd say it's the aloha spirit. And that's hard to explain to people if they've never been, but it's just the they put a lei on your head, and they just give you a little kiss on the cheek. And it's like, it's just such a wonderful thing. And then the weather was so awesome. I love the ocean. I grew up in Southern California in Laguna Beach and San Diego and those areas. And so I was always around the ocean, but I was not a big fan of cold water. So, the water in Hawaii is warmer. It's not Florida warm, but it's warmer than California. So that was nice. But, so yeah, when we got a chance, we, my family bought into this house. We retained 1 month every 2 years. So from the time my kids were born, every 2 years, they got to spend a month in Hawaii.
That's really cool.
We stayed in the same house. It was so close. I could go out on over there, they're called lanais. You might call them like a back porch here or whatever, but you could go out on the lanai and I could throw a rock into the ocean. That's how close we were. So you hear the waves at night when you're laying in bed. I mean, it was just magical. And so this is what my kids grew up knowing. And so in 2002, we bought a place on the island of Maui, just because Maui to us A lot less people, not as hectic and crazy as Oahu is with Honolulu and all the traffic and everything, and beautiful beaches. So that's a little quick story of Hawaii for me. But I always wanted to live there, and so in 2014, my daughter got accepted into school on the island of Oahu, and so I told my wife, why don't we just move to stay in our condo? And so we did. We moved over to Hawaii in 2014, over to Maui, and I had my real estate license there, and we had another company there that we were trying to get going, taking care of luxury properties. And so we spent a couple of years doing that. And when people say, how did you always wanted to live there, why did you leave? And I use the term that I hear all the time now, and that is priced out of paradise. And it's really true. It just kept getting more and more expensive. And, when you're spending $11 for a gallon of milk, $5, $6 for a loaf of bread, I mean, everything just costs more because as tourism became a bigger and bigger part of Hawaii, they quit growing a lot of their crops. They took their pineapple fields and their sugar cane and they just, plowed them under, and they don't even grow that stuff hardly at all anymore. And so I was just talking with another friend. He was on my podcast this week, and he lives in Hawaii, and he has his own podcast called Living the Aloha Life, which is the #1 podcast in Hawaii. And we just talked about that. We just said that if a hurricane hits or some big issue on the West Coast, Hawaii's got about a 7 to 10 day food supply.
Yeah.
And so, they're isolated. And because of that, everything is brought in. And now you can see why everything's so expensive. Even if you go to Costco, which everybody does that lives in Hawaii, but still, a television, you can just add an extra $60 to it because that's what it costs to ship it over, So, yeah. So that's it. As people say, why'd you leave? It was really just because of the expense. If we could have lived the lifestyle we're living here in Southern Utah, we wouldn't have left.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something that they talk about whenever you go visit some of the Caribbean islands as well. It's just like, yeah, you can live here, but if you want to live a lifestyle that just a normal average lifestyle that you live kind of in the US, it's going to cost a lot if you want to live in one of the more popular areas.
Yeah, and some people are willing to do with less. And I'd say the average home, I mean, our condo was 818 square feet. So anybody that understands home sizes, because in America, the homes are typically bigger than other places in the world. Yeah. But in Hawaii, they're smaller. I mean, and my friends who've lived in Hawaii their whole life, a lot of them have 2 and 3 generations living in the same, 1,500 square foot home. So and they're working 2 and 3 jobs just to stay there. There are more people now. There are more Hawaiians that live on the mainland than live in Hawaii now.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yep. Man. A lot of my softball teammates, I played on a team over there called Kaneva, and several of my teammates, since we left in 2016, several of those teammates are now living in the Las Vegas area. There's a lot of Hawaiians that live in Las Vegas. They call it the Ninth Island. And you've got so in Hawaii, there's L&L Barbecue, there's ABC stores, which are like 7-Elevens. Anyway, all these things that they have in Hawaii, they have in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow. Oh, they've just kind of recreated a little bit of the kind of culture and vibe there a little bit.
Yeah, there's tens of thousands of Hawaiians living in the Las Vegas area. Henderson is a city that, butts up against Las Vegas. So a lot of them live in Henderson, and we have a lot here in the Southern Utah area as well.
That's
pretty cool.
I wonder how Las Vegas became that. Like, that's such an odd choice for someone who's used to living on an island.
That in Hawaii is one of only 2 states that has no gambling. That you can't buy a lottery ticket. There's nothing in Hawaii. The other one would be Utah, where I live. So, but we live 45 minutes from Mesquite, Nevada. So if we ever want to go gamble or whatever, we could just go for 45 minutes away. It's not that big a deal. And we're about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Las Vegas, depending on how fast you drive. But so when people are in Hawaii, it's funny because over here on the mainland and the West Coast, you're always talking about, and you see advertised trips to beautiful Hawaii. Well, when you live in Hawaii, you always see advertisements for Las Vegas.
That's pretty neat.
So And so that's where they would go on vacation. And so when they're going to move somewhere, well, that's where they were familiar with. So that's how I think it started out with people coming to Las Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes some sense. I never would have connected Las Vegas with Hawaii though, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a left turn here. Do you have a true crime story that fascinates you?
Well, my wife loves true crime. I am not joking when I say that I have to be careful, because if my wife ever wanted to do away with me, I guarantee she wouldn't get caught. She has learned everything. She's even told me about some of the ways to do stuff, and it's just kind of like funny but scary.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
But
honey. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. But I do have a little bit of one that kind of involved me, just kind of on the side. But in 1985, there was a couple of bombings and people killed in Salt Lake City. And at the time, here we are back to Vegas, but at the time I was living in Las Vegas, and I was part of a group of 5 stores that we opened there. They were quick lube or quick oil change facility. And so the money to open those stores came from a group of investors. So one of the guys, Steve Christensen, on October 15th, 1985, he bent over to pick up a package and it exploded and he was killed.
Oh, wow.
This is in Salt Lake City. He had been in my office 10 days earlier down in Las Vegas. And the same day, his boss was a man by the name of Gary Sheets. And at the same day, there was a package at his house and his wife bent over to pick it up and it went off and it killed her.
Oh.
So, just kind of crazy stuff. And of course, this is before cell phones and different things, but it didn't take long for me to get a phone call at my store saying, hey, we don't know what's going on, but Steve Christensen and Gary Sheets' wife were both just killed. The next day, another bomb went off, and this bomb didn't kill the individual, but it seriously injured him, and he was in the hospital. His name was Mark Hoffman. Now, a lot of people might be familiar with Mark Hoffman because he is known as one of the best forgers in the history of anything. I mean, the guy was an unbelievable forger. And so what he was doing was he was forging documents and then selling them to the Mormon church and getting tens of thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. But then Steve Christensen started to figure it out, and that's why he was killed. And then, so he was basically just trying to cover and make it look like it was a group that was dissatisfied with this financial group.
Yeah.
But here's the part I wanted to get to. So I get this phone call. They say, hey, check around your store for packages. Don't pick anything up. Look around your car before you start it up. So I'm going out in the morning, getting in my car and turning the key and just hoping nothing happens. I mean, That's how crazy it was, because it took 3 months for them to figure out that the last guy that got blown up, he was the one that was doing it. Mm-hmm. And if you want to watch that, what I just told you, it's on Netflix. It came out in 2021. It's a 3-parter called Murder Amongst the Mormons.
Oh.
So, yep,
okay.
it's on there, and I'm telling you, but to be a part of that, I mean, I can kind of look back on it now and maybe even talk about it in obviously not as a serious topic like it was all those years ago. Mm-hmm. But I mean, to turn that key, I mean, it was crazy. It was crazy, and so that was it. That's kind of my story. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely something that we were talking about, podcasting, TV shows. I mean, anything to do with crime and serial killers, and it's popular.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I think a lot of it is like, sometimes you feel like the more you know about something, the more you can control it, or the more you can prepare for it. But nothing's going to prepare you for that fear of like, I'm going to turn the key in my car now and hope I don't die. I'm going to pick up this package 100%. And hope it's not a bomb. Like you can't necessarily prepare yourself for that. But I think just as humans, we feel like more information is sometimes better. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. A lot of people can't handle true crime. That's okay. I happen to be one of the people who loves it. I listen to a podcast every night while I'm cooking dinner all about true crime. So it's what I'm doing. And Bite Mark says, oh, I'm preparing for covering up murders, not getting murdered. Listen. You got to learn somehow. You can't have that in your search history, just listen to podcasts.
That's right.
Do not murder people. We are not condoning that. We are not encouraging that.
Yes, we're not advocating that.
For sure. Allegedly. Yes, there you go. All right. So can you talk a little bit about how your upbringing in the Mormon faith influenced your understanding of mental health, either positively or negatively? How was that talked about in terms of religion and especially the Mormon faith?
If I get into that, I guess we have, a 3-hour limit? So I guess we have time. So I'm kidding you. But I'll make it brief.
The longest I've ever done, I think, was 4 hours. And that was because the guest and I were just constant back and forth, and it was just fine. So you can talk however much you want, as long as we're having a good time and vibing, we're good.
Okay. I think that, we are the religion of our parents. I mean, that's just the way it is. I was born in Provo, Utah, to two people who were going to Brigham Young University, which is the flagship school of the Mormon faith. And I should say, they don't even like the term Mormon anymore. This new guy that's in charge now, he likes to have the full name, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
Hard to fit that on a T-shirt, but Mormon just works a little better. But the guy before him loved the phrase, and he had this whole program marketing thing called "I'm a Mormon." And so it's so funny to see how these different leaders get into their position, and they've had this thing they've been excited about. They can't wait to get there, and they live long enough, they make it. So the guy that's the head of the Mormon faith right now, he turns 100 years old next month. So
wow,
this is and the two guys that are his, second and third in command, they're both in their 90s. So these are the guys that are, quote, leading the Mormon faith. Well, of course, I did air quotes there because they're not leading it. But, technically the believers think they are. So I'm going to get back to your question about the mental health aspect of it. So in a high demand religion, and, we can argue all day whether, who's got the higher demands. But the Mormon faith, if you're living it the way they want you to, there's a lot of demands, not just on your everyday living, but just on your time. They try to occupy all your time if they can. They used to have, we would go to 3 separate church meetings on a Sunday when I was growing up. You would go to this thing called priesthood meeting at 8 a.m, hour and a half, come home. Then we'd get the rest of the family. Then we'd go back to Sunday school, hour and a half, come home. And then after a couple of hours, we'd go back and we'd have another meeting for an hour and a half. That's just Sunday. Mm-hmm. And then you're supposed to be, and when you get into be a teenager, you have seminary, which is, if you don't live in Utah, I lived in San Diego. So every morning we'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and we'd go to this meeting for 45 minutes before I ever went to school. And in Utah, they actually have buildings next to the schools, and the kids just walk across the street and go to the buildings. So I think they do that in Idaho also, just areas where they have a lot of Mormons. But so I'm just saying this because I want to try to illustrate just how much of you're supposed to be reading your scriptures every day. You're supposed to be having morning and day and evening prayers. You cannot eat and drink certain things. For example, there's kind of a joke anymore, because now we know that coffee actually in moderation is good for you, but you can't drink any hot drinks. Of course, we always joke about that, like, you can't drink hot drink. Why can't I drink coffee? Because it's a hot drink. Oh, I'll just drink iced coffee then. No, you can't do that either. Well, wait a minute. I thought it was hot drinks. I mean, anyway, so you can see that now that I'm out, I can kind of make a little fun at it, because it is pretty goofy. And back to what I said, the guy now doesn't like to use the term Mormon. Used to be Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. These are names that maybe some people may have heard of because they were the ones who started the church. They drank coffee. They drank alcohol. So it was just guys that came along later that said, you know what, I don't want that anymore. And so then you can't do it anymore. And one other thing that I should mention is that you have to give up 10% of your earnings to the church. They have these temples all around. Matter of fact, there's one, I'm not sure how close Fairview is to you, but it's probably not too far away from where you live. I think it's in the Dallas, about 30 or 40 minutes from Dallas, they said. But
okay.
they're building a big temple there, and they had a big vote to the city council last week, and because they want to put this steeple on it that's like 168 feet high,
Oh,
and then lit up at night. And of course, the people in this small town, they don't want that, and so it got voted down 7-0. And so, what does the Mormon Church say? See you in court. So yeah, that's not how I think most of us think a religion should work. It should be kind of
right.
getting along with the people and not try to be overbearing and so forth. So back to the whole Mormon thing. When you turn, well, I was back to the temples. I'm sorry. The temples is where you go, but you can only go in there if you're paying your 10% tithing. But that's where you're supposed to go to get married. That's where you're supposed to have these ordinances that are supposed to be done that can only be done on this earth life, because they believe that when you die, you're going to these other places and that you need to have these ordinances performed. But you have to, so we call it pay to play, right? So
Yeah.
if you're going to go in, you better be paying your tithing or they won't let you in. You can't even go in and watch your own child be married.
Oh my gosh.
Happens all the time. My grandmother could not go in and watch her daughter be married because she wasn't what they call a recommend holder at the time.
Wow. So like a non-Mormon couldn't go to something like that at all.
Hell no.
Wow.
Nope. Even Mormons that are Mormons can't go unless they're paying their 10%.
Yeah. That's intense.
So I want to get back to this mental side of this, because you can imagine that one of the things that you can never do is you can never do enough. You can be following everything that you're asked to do. All those things I just said: morning and evening prayer, scripture study, attending all your meetings, abstaining from tobacco and coffee and hot drinks like tea. Oh my gosh, tea. And, all these different things. And yet, I had an unclean thought, or, I didn't spend as much time studying the scriptures as I could have. And so what happens is people were constantly beating themselves up.
Right.
I knew people in high positions. You spoke about your grandfather with the fireman's axe there. There's a lot of people I know personally who have taken their lives because they just can't accept the fact that they're not worthy enough. They're not doing enough.
Not good enough.
They're not good enough, 100%. And so when a young man turns 19, at least when I was back in my time, they've now lowered it to 18, but when I was there, it was 19. You were expected to go and give 2 years of your life, knocking on doors, basically recruiting for the church. You can call it what you want. Missionary work is what they call it, but you're basically recruiting for them. And I did that for 2 years. So did my sister. She went to Italy. My brother went to England. I was lucky enough to go to Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado. How exciting, huh?
That's not as fabulous.
What? My sister gets Italy and I'm going to like Holbrook, Arizona? Anyway, but 2 years of that, and that was difficult. You're 19, 20. You can't date girls. We couldn't even listen to music. We couldn't go to movies. We couldn't read books. You couldn't do anything for 2 years except missionary work. Now, I know some people don't like the C word, and it's cult. And I'm going to tell you something, because as a member of the church, when somebody would say that, I bristled, because I did not believe I was part of a cult. But I've been out now for 7 or 8 years, and I've done a lot of studying. I know more about Mormonism now than I ever knew as a member, which is interesting. But there was a book that was written by a gentleman named Stephen Hassan, and he has what is called the bite model. And this is an easy way for people to understand this, because I know people that are listening right now, some are super religious, some aren't religious at all, and there's people everywhere in between. But this doesn't always have to just be with religion. It can be with other groups too. But if you're part of a group that, and I'm going to spell this acronym out, BITE, B-I-T-E. So the B is for if they control your behavior. The I would be information. The T would be thoughts. And the E would be emotions. So if you're part of a group that controls those 4 things, you might be in a cult. And I'm telling you right now, that's 100% what the Mormon religion did. And when I was brought up, we were taught free agency. You have the free agency to look at that Playboy magazine. Of course, you may have to repent if you do, but it's your free agency to do it. Now they don't even use that anymore. Now it's all obedience, and they demand obedience. And so I'm just glad I got out when I did. And I should say that it's my daughter, who was in college at the time, that brought things to our attention. Because one of the things that any successful, I'll use that word again, cult will do is they'll say things like, do not listen to other people outside of the organization. Do not read any, and they use the term, anti-Mormon literature. Now it would be, do not listen to any anti-Mormon podcasts, or do not watch any anti-Mormon television programming, or whatever. They just want to keep you, we would call it, kind of under the bubble or in the bubble. They want to keep you that way because that's, once you step outside, once you pull that curtain back and see that man standing there and I am the voice of Oz, and whoop, it's just a little old man standing back there. Once you see that and that curtain's pulled back, it's like my wife says, you can't unring a bell.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a real quick, the mental side of it would be just what I said. You can look this up. Don't take my word for it. And that's something else they would never say.
Right.
But educate yourself. Look things up. People say, what took you out of Mormonism? Google.
Yep.
So, the information's out there, but you got to look. And if you keep saying, no, I'm not going to look, I'm told not to, then you'll never know. You'll stay in. You'll die and think you're going to Mormon heaven. And, it's just not going to happen. And having lost a son, actually, after we left the Mormon faith, that was pretty tough because, as a member of that high demand religion, we had all the answers. I knew where my son was going to be when I was a member of the faith. Yeah. I knew where he was going to be, that I could be reunited again. Their little slogan that they have, bumper stickers, whatever, our families are forever. But then if you say, what does that mean? They're like, well, we'll know more after we pass on. They don't know. It's just a little catchphrase that they all say. No empty chairs. That's another one they like to say. So for me, I've left now, so now there's an empty chair for my family in heaven. So, I'm not trying to mock them. I'm just saying it makes no sense if you just do a little bit of studying and investigating, and that's what I would encourage people to do. Is just research. Just don't take people's word for things. But back to what I was going to tell you, Utah. I don't know if it's this year, but for many years, Utah led the nation in a per capita of people using prescription drugs, because so many people here, and my sister, who still believes, told me the term was mommy's little helpers. And so many of her friends are taking these things because they are depressed. They are coming up short. They're not good enough. And so what happens is there's this image, right? You show up to church and you see the Baxter family, man, they got their shit together. All the kids look beautiful. The girls' hair's all combed. Their clothes are clean. And look at my kids are in wrinkled shirts. And you just beat yourself up. And you don't realize that when the Baxters get home, they're like, I told you to get over here. They got the same problems, but it's all about image. And that's a big part of, I'd be lying if I didn't say that when I had kids and my kids were in high school, that maybe they would do something and I'd say, oh, that reflects poorly on Judy and I. I think that's normal, a little bit of that. But when it becomes more of a dominant part of your life, then I think that's where the problems are. And I know people who have left the church and their spouses divorce them.
Is that allowed in the Mormon faith? Is divorce allowed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have those temple marriages, and here's the big difference. When you're married civilly, it'll say something like, and I don't know exactly, but it'll say something like, till death do you part. Mm-hmm. When you get married in the Mormon temple, it says, for time and all eternity. So, because one of the tenets of the Mormon faith is that we're just here in this probationary period. It's the blink of an eye, because once you die, you are then, based on what you do here in this earth life, right? You are then given some sort of a reward. And life goes on forever. It's eternal. So they believe that, if you're like me, who's left the church, I'm going to be in the lowest kingdom, right? Mm-hmm. Bummer for me. But if you, yeah, exactly. But then there's one that's kind of in between. And then there's the top one called the celestial kingdom. And they believe that if you are there, and this is something they don't like to talk about, but it's a big part of their belief, well, as a man, you get any number of wives that you want. You can have thousands of wives, and those wives are having children for eternity. So, Mama, if you were there, you'd be having kids forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Doesn't that sound like heaven to you?
Sounds like hell to me. What did I do?
And and that is the funniest part of it is when I look at all these people that are supposedly going to that celestial kingdom, I told my wife, I go, I wouldn't even want to be with those people.
Yeah.
Why would I ever want to? I mean, those are the people I would not want to be with. So,
yeah.
But so that's a real quick 10-minute little, story of Mormonism. But I was in it for 60 years, raised my children in it, and I'm proud that they're all out. And I've told my family members, we are here if you ever have questions.
Yeah.
They don't have questions. They
No.
don't ask. I wish they would because I love them. And I feel bad when I know they're cutting checks every month to this corporation that is worth over $300 billion.
Yeah.
So, so that's the Mormon thing. And there is a lot of mental health issues amongst members of the church for sure. And not just in the Mormon faith. I'm sure it's the same thing for Jehovah's Witness. I think I always say Jehovah's Witness because they are probably the closest thing in my mind when I was growing up to Mormonism, as far as the demands on your time and your, this crazy lifestyle and the things they demand. But I'm sure there's they have probably a lot of mental health issues as well.
Well, and even outside of high demand religions, like I said, I was raised Baptist, and it's amazing how much stress church brings. And being a part of not high demand. Baptist is not high, honestly, at all high demand. But that judgment that you're talking about is always there. The most judgment you're ever going to get is from the people sitting next to you in the pew. And it's stressful. and a lot of it is like, if you're having a mental health issue, if you're having something negative happening in your life, you need to trust God and put all this faith in this. And if it doesn't change, then you're not believing hard enough. And it's one of those things that it's so damaging to your mental health sometimes. And some people find a lot of comfort in it. And I'm not saying that is wrong or that you should not find comfort in whatever you do believe, whatever faith you are a part of. But it is really damaging sometimes to be told you're not believing, you're not praying hard enough. That's what it is. You're depressed because you're not praying hard enough.
It's a lot more damaging to the women and to the girls because when these girls, like when Judy was a teenager, or my daughter, when she was a teenager, they would have these lessons because they're all about not having sex before you're married.
Yeah.
And it's a big, big thing. Second only to murder is what they teach them. And they say they'll do these object lessons where they'll take a board and a nail and a hammer, and they'll hammer this nail into the board, and then they'll pull the nail out. They'll say, when you have sex, it's like that. Even though the nail's gone, that hole is still there. Or they'll use a chewed piece of gum. Oh, here, you want some gum? Oh, I don't want to chew that. Yeah, well, that's how your husband's going to feel about you when he finds out you've had sex before. I mean, so these girls are just beat up for years and years. I mean, especially if they did something, right? So, I mean, if they did something, they're always told your dress is too short. Your neckline's too low. You can't have more than one earring. That's a for real thing. You don't want to tempt the men. You are tempting them. So it's like they're guilty just by, heaven forbid, they have big bosoms or something, right? I mean, it's like they're just hammered. And so you wonder why the girls, and here's the other part, the church is patriarchal.
Yeah.
A woman can never be in a leadership position, as far as leading the congregation, or, they have a prophet and 12 apostles. You think one's a woman? No way. They have to have the holy priesthood, and that's for men only. So as soon as a boy turns 12 years old, he gets the priesthood. He has more power in the eyes of the church than his mother or anyone else, any other woman. So I mean, it's bad enough that I was a member, but I cannot understand why women put up with that stuff. But
yeah,
I guess they believe.
Well, and if you're raised in it, it's hard to change that. If you're raised that way,
it is.
It's hard to say.
And I have to remind myself, I was in it for 60 years.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, that's what I said. I mean, I can see it now and go, what the hell was I thinking?
Yep.
Because I had all these little inklings, right? You imagine a shelf and something would happen and I would just put it up on the shelf. I just put it up on the shelf. And after 50, 60 years, my shelf finally just broke. And it was reading those essays that my daughter told us about that were actually put out by the church. It wasn't even anti-Mormon. It was their own essays, but they were having to kind of finally come and be truthful about some things they'd lied about for many, many years because of, again, the internet. The internet is forcing them to be truthful about their history.
Yeah.
And they never had to be. They could always just say that this is how it happened and nobody would ever question it. Whoop. Well, now we have facts.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this.
So,
Bite Mark says, can confirm my husband was just fine chewing that gum. Look, it's fine. All right.
yeah. Yeah. So I hope I don't come across as angry. I did definitely go through, you hear this saying, the truth will set you free. And that's true. But first it'll piss you off.
Yeah.
So I went through that for a few years.
You can get mad. You can stay mad. It's all right. Anger is just another emotion.
Yeah. It is. And if you really care about your friends and your family, then you just want to see them happy. And
Absolutely.
I think that these talks come from the pulpit by these leaders. And they say, if you leave the church, you won't be happy. Your children will end up, murderers, they just kind of give these talks. And then people see us and we've never been happier. And our friends are all happy and we're doing great things. And they're kind of like, thought they were supposed to be unhappy. But
yeah.
That's all we can do, right? Is be a good example. And so when people now say to me, "So you're not Mormon? What are you?" And I go, "I'm nothing. And like I said earlier, I'm a hopeful agnostic." And I say, if you looked at my website, nobody knows Larry Camp. If you look at my book, nobody knows. They just want you to think they do. If you look at my podcast, nobody knows your story. And so this is my latest tattoo.
I love it. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that's what I tell people when they ask me, it's like, hey, nobody knows. They might feel like they know. They might even tell you they know. They might even testify that they know, but they don't know.
Yeah, no, they don't. You know, what's funny? You're talking about, oh, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to be this. You're never going to be that. It sounds like my ex-husband who was abusive. And it's like, that's an abuse tactic. It's a control tactic. It's a manipulation tactic. And it's hard to see that when you're in it. But once you're past it, you're like, what?
Yeah, and he probably told you that you wouldn't be happy.
Oh yeah.
Him.
Oh yeah. I would be nothing. I would be worthless. No one would want me. All of those things. All of them. I heard all of them.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And
couldn't be more wrong.
That carried some power, I'm sure it carried power for a while.
It did. It did. It definitely did. For sure. Yeah. They have to keep that thread. It's necessary to keeping people in. You have a purpose here. It might not be fun, but you'll be miserable if you leave. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So you left the Mormon faith, and obviously that's a significant transition in your life. Did that impact your mental and emotional well-being? And then how do you view mental health after having left? Is that relationship with yourself a little better, or how has that all gone?
I think it's definitely better. And I would say probably for anybody who leaves, because all these things that we were talking about that you were beating yourself up for, well, now they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Because let's say that as a member of the church, like I was into running big time back in 2001, 2002. I ran 3 marathons in 1 year, and I would take Runner's World magazine. I'd read the articles, and there was an article about the health benefits of drinking coffee and running. And so I started drinking coffee then. Not because I wanted to be a sinner and drink coffee. I drank it because it was going to help me with my running. Mm-hmm. But was I a little guilty about it because I know I wasn't really supposed to do it? A little bit. I've never been one that's probably felt the guilt like some people, but I felt some guilt. It kept me from doing certain things because I knew I wasn't supposed to. I kind of had a line I wouldn't cross on different things and whatever. So once you're out and you realize, well, that's just a bunch of hooey, I can do what I want. I don't have to feel bad about those things. And so from a mental health aspect, I think for a lot of people, their mental health improves because they don't have that guilt and shame anymore that they had when they felt like they were coming up short all the time. A lot of the women are encouraged, of course, their role in life is to be a mother. they didn't like that. You were not encouraged to work outside the home. That's
Right.
changed a little bit in the last 10, 15 years. It's very difficult for families anymore to try to get by on one income. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. But my mom was a school teacher. I always, and my friends, all their moms were at home. And I always thought, wow, that's so weird. My mom's working and their moms are home. And I don't know if they looked down on my mom for working, or maybe some people thought, good for her. I don't know. But I know that was an example to me of somebody doing things maybe a little bit outside the approved box at that time. And, my mom, I don't think she ever, I never looked at my mom as having those type of mental health issues from the church. I don't think that it impacted her that way, but she was also a convert. So she didn't grow up in that high demand religion as a teenager and things. She was in a mixed faith marriage. Her parents were, I should say, Mormon and Methodist. So Eminem. But they made it work. They stayed together for like 65 years or whatever, but they made it work. And, but I think my mom was an example, and she went through a divorce later in life. My dad, I don't think I even told you this, but when I was on my Mormon mission, I was given this blessing before I left, and it said, your family will be protected while you're out serving the Lord. That meant a lot to me. I was the oldest son, second oldest of 6 children. And about 1 year into my mission, I get a phone call because, again, no cell phones, no pagers, nothing back then. It took them 3 days to find me. But I get this call, and they said, hey, your brother Jeff has broken his neck, and he's in the hospital, and they're not sure if he's going to live.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
I'm like, well, right away, I thought of the blessing. I thought, wait a minute. I was given this blessing that my family would be protected, right? So I just want to illustrate this because they said, we're going to do a special fast and ask the Lord to bless him that he will be healed. And so please, fast with us. Tell those around you to fast also. Just more blessings can only help. Okay. So I was in New Mexico at the time. It's summertime, hot. We're out walking. We didn't have a car, so we walked. I was in a little town, had dirt roads, didn't even have paved roads. And I got so thirsty. I went and knocked on a door, and I said, can I just have a glass of water? And I drank that water. My brother was not healed. He was a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. For years, I thought it was because I drank that glass of water that he wasn't healed.
Oh, no.
But when I say, and we talk about the mental side of it, and I kind of say, well, yeah, I was fine. It didn't really affect me. Well, all I have to do is think of that little story.
Yeah.
And it did affect me. It did. I mean, I harbored that and carried that for quite a while. I've never even told a lot of people that because I felt bad. I felt like he might have been healed to a higher degree and could walk if I hadn't drank that water, Crazy, but that's how it plays on you. So yeah, the mentally better, and all my friends, and I've got a lot of them here that are in my age bracket. Some of their children are still in the church. Some of their children have left the church. Some of them are half and half. But they would all tell you every single one of them would say they're happier being out and knowing the truth than staying in there like they were. So I can't speak for everybody. I'm sure there's some people who've left the church that aren't happy, maybe things haven't worked out for them. I don't know, but I can only, speak my story.
I know there are plenty of people who find a lot of comfort in religion, find a lot of comfort in those even that strict of a religion kind of, like you were saying, the demands of the religion. Some people find comfort in that. Some people find it just appealing. And if they lose that, it's a loss of structure.
Structure and community.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the Mormon church, I don't know there's anybody that does community better than the Mormon church. I mean, if a woman goes in to have a baby, there are meals prepared every night for her family. If somebody's sick, and that community is strong. And I know people, we call them PMOs, physically in, mentally out. And they have stayed in the church and going because they love the community, even though they don't believe anymore.
Yeah. Hey, listen.
Yeah. So there are some positive aspects of religion. You're right. There are some positive aspects. So all I can say is if you're part of a group that is promoting good, healthy things and they're not beating people up, demeaning women, whatever, then fine. But if you're part of a group that is unhealthy, then
Mhm.
think of the bite model. That's all I'll say. Just think of that bite model.
Yeah.
And if you're part of a group that you can define that by BITE, and wow, my gosh, then there you go.
Mhm.
Do a little research.
Yeah. So my grandfather was a preacher in the Church of Christ church. And when he passed, my grandmother doesn't drive, so she was home all the time, still is home all the time. And they kind of just abandoned her a little bit. And it really pissed my dad off. And my dad gave him an earful of like, y'all preach. You preach all of this community. You preach all of this. You take care of yourself. You preach all of this. We're all part of the same flock. And you couldn't even reach out to the wife of one of your main preachers when he passed away. And they, of course, immediately put her on the weekly reach out. Now she gets flowers every week. She gets a card. She gets meals brought to her and all of that. But he had to really push for that community to be applied because she wasn't physically going to the church. And it's like, sometimes you lose that and it kind of jolts you a little bit. And I think, at least for my dad, that was a little bit of a jolt for him, of just realizing that, if it's out of sight, out of mind sometimes. And so losing that little bit of community, I'm sure, is just, in some cases, very devastating. But if you can leave, and like you said, y'all are connected with your neighbors, you've got all these hobbies that you're involved in, you can find community outside of the church as well. So I get why people stay. I definitely get why people leave. It's a lot of why I left as well. So,
yeah. And that's a hard thing. If you're not involved in any hobbies, or let's just say that you're kind of a homebody, like your grandmother and my grandmother. My grandmother didn't drive. She never worked outside the home. So she would have been in the same boat. So, and if that's the case, then what do you do if you leave the church? Now, that was your community. That was your life.
Yeah.
So those are the people that have struggled a little bit. And we have a meeting. There's meetings everywhere, but we have a meeting here, and it's for people who just kind of want to have a little community outside now that they've left Mormonism. And it's just a group that gets together and they kind of get each other because they all came from that background.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a healthy way to, it helps you to see that there's others out there that are kind of going through similar things. And sometimes there's just that strength in knowing that others are traveling that same path with you.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Not to keep talking about my dad's life. I love my dad. So he's a retired fireman, and he goes to breakfast with the firemen on a weekly basis. And my neighbor is also a retired fireman, and he was talking about missing the sense of community, because firemen are definitely a community. I'm not going to call them a religion, but they have each other's backs. They're brothers, essentially. And you're with the same shift for years and years and years. And then when you retire, all of a sudden that's all gone. And my neighbor was talking about being a little lonely and wishing that he had something like that, like what he used to have. And so I connected him in with that. I don't know if he's gone or not, but just having like a retired fireman's breakfast once a week is something that you can really set something like that up. Just find some people who are like-minded, and you don't have to go that kind of thing alone. You can find people, and you can find people online for any interest. You can find people online as well. And we've done a whole podcast on whether or not social connections online are just as valid as IRL, like in-person connections. And the spoiler there is that, yes, they are. So yeah, sometimes even probably a little easier because,
you're in your comfort zone, right? When you're in your home and you're wearing what you want to wear, and you don't have to get all gussied up to go out or whatever, But, when you were saying, I hope it's okay if I talk about my dad, I'm like, remember, my podcast is Nobody Knows Your Story. And so I love hearing people's stories. I mean, I really do. It's just, there's an expression in Hawaii called talk story. And when we used to play softball, we'd have a game in the morning, maybe at 10 o'clock, we'd be done at 11:30. Then we'd have like a potluck, wives, and we'd all get around together and have a potluck. And then a lot of people would kind of go home, but some people would stick around for 6, 8, 10 hours and just visit and talk, drink a little Heineken Light.
Hey.
That's the beer of Hawaii, at least amongst my teammates. Heineken Light. Who would have thought in Hawaii that'd be the beer? But that's what they liked.
I like Heineken. I don't know that I've had Heineken Light.
Yeah, I made the mistake and brought Heineken one time. They're like, "Oh no, bro, we don't drink
That's
that."
not it. You
Okay.
missed.
All right.
Swing and a
Well,
miss.
I guess I'll have to keep those for myself then.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier the loss of your son and that your other son Crosby struggled out in the kind of face of that. So you've really experienced some devastating loss and really enormous challenges in your life beyond just all the religion things that we've talked about so far. How do you continue to find strength and resilience after everything your family's been through?
If I really had to point to one thing, I would point to the fact that I had been married to my best friend for 43 years. And when you lose a child, as we did in 2018, we were just devastated. He died from a ruptured iliac artery. So I was at a softball tournament in Las Vegas. My wife was actually in Hawaii, attending the birth of our first grandchild.
Hmm.
And he's in Phoenix, Arizona. He was a surveyor, and he just had tremendous stomach pains. They took him to the hospital, kept him there about 6 hours. This is on a Thursday. They let him out. Said, "Yeah, go on home. We don't see anything." Next day, he didn't go to work. He stayed home. The next day, he was on the phone, and he just said, "I gotta go. I gotta go." And he hung up the phone, and he stood up, clutched his stomach, collapsed, and he was gone within an hour.
Wow.
And so again, if you remember what I said earlier, we had all the answers as members of the Mormon faith. And to all of a sudden now, I remember standing there looking at my son in the casket. We had a celebration of life, which is weird when you think you're celebrating somebody who lived 31 years. But I'm grateful. I know people who lost a child at 14 or 7 or whatever. So I'm glad I had him for 31 years. And he wasn't perfect. Sometimes we memorialize these people that have passed on. But he was a good guy, and he had just gotten married the year before. I just helped him he and his wife buy a condo. They hadn't even had it 90 days, and so he was really just getting going in his life, and was excited to see his new niece that had just been born 5 days earlier, and so yeah, it was pretty devastating. And the only thing I can say is I'm a pretty tough person, but I think I made it through that, and still, even now, because of the strength of my wife, and she would tell you the same thing, is that we just kind of leaned on each other. And the weird thing was, we had just sold our house in Arizona. We were in the process of loading up boxes and things when he passed. I had taken off to come to this tournament. She'd gone over to Hawaii. Then we were going to just kind of regroup and finalize our move, and then come here to Southern Utah. So we moved here 4 weeks after he passed, and we didn't know one person here. So here we are in this new place. We just lost our son. We're still kind of emotional wrecks. We just left the faith that we'd been in for 60 years, just the year before. And so we had a lot going on, but you know what? That I got through that, and I continue to get through that because I truly am just blessed to have Judy for my spouse. And I was married briefly before her, to somebody I met when I was 14 years old that I thought would be my eternal companion forever, right? Because Mormons believe you're married for eternity. And I was like, cool, yeah, I can be married to her forever. But I think 18 months was enough of forever for her. So she's like, we're done. I shouldn't have gotten married. I was too young. And I'm so grateful that happened, because I think it also, what it did for me was, it kind of was rough on me to go through that, because I was the first person in my family to ever be divorced. And so I had that little stigma, right, of, my own little, should I give back the crock pots I got for a gift? I mean, it was only 18 months ago. I mean, anyway, so, yeah, that was a drag. But then I remember talking to my dad, and he goes, you know what? 2 years from now, you'll probably be remarried and everything will be fine. And I hung up the phone. I go, what the hell? He doesn't even get it. But you know what? He was right. I moved to Hawaii. I went to school in Hawaii. I came back. I met Judy. We dated for like, I don't know, 10 months and got married. And he was right. And it's just been it's been great. And I left the church before she did. I found all this information out, and I wasn't concerned about her divorcing me, but I was concerned about her being unhappy with me.
Sure.
And that lasted only about 3 months. And, I was able to say, hey, I heard this podcast. Why don't you check it out? It happens to be a gal that I went to school with, and I think you might enjoy it. And of course, it happened to be a podcast that was dealing with someone who left the Mormon faith.
Yeah.
And so she listened to it, and then she wanted to hear another one, and then she wanted to get a book, and then she did her own study, and she was out. And the funny thing is my personality, I'm always a, glasses half full guy and optimistic and like to have fun and good times. And some might even say I'm a little persuasive, that I can be a salesman. So everybody would say, oh, yeah, Larry took Judy out of the church, And I said, you know what? You guys aren't giving Judy enough credit. She would tell me to, take a hike if she doesn't agree with something.
Yeah.
And she did that on her own. And so, but I guess what I'm saying is we've been fortunate that all along our path of marriage, for the most part, we've been unified on all the big decisions that we've had to make in our life, whether it be moving to another state or leaving the church or, and like you said, my son Crosby, he's had issues with drugs since he was 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And he was doing okay. And I use that, I should do the air quotes again. He was doing okay at the time Dusty passed away. Crosby was actually living with us at the time. And because we told him, hey, if you abide by the law and you don't do any drugs, you can live with us. You can get your feet back on the ground. So he was actually living with us. And when I was in Las Vegas and got that phone call that Dusty had passed away, I told Judy, I said, I'll call Crosby. And I called him, and I'll never forget that phone call. And he was just, it was like 9:00 at night, and he was just out of control. And I just said, hey, I'm going to get in the car right now. I'm going to drive home. I'll be there in 5 hours. Just don't do anything. And I got home, and, we cried, and we, it was a rough week or two. And then we moved up here to Utah. Within, I don't even know if it was 30 days, he was in jail because he just got back into the drugs and stuff. And even this moment right now, he's incarcerated right now. Because he's just not been able to, even he can finally talk a little bit about his brother passing, but it's still not easy for him.
Yeah.
Because at that point in his life, all of his friends were married and they had families and they had careers. And here he'd done 20 years or at that point, probably 15 years of nothing really. Just, sometimes he's homeless. Sometimes he had a job, but so he was always beating himself up. And so his only real friend was his brother. They would talk about boxing. They both played guitars. They had a lot in common. And sometimes I'd be in the one part of my house and all of a sudden I'd hear this laughter coming from Crosby's room. And I'm like, I guess Dusty must have come in the house or something. And Dusty would come in through the garage and come in to Crosby's room. And I wouldn't even know it until I heard them down there laughing. Mm-hmm. So when he passed, it just devastated Crosby. And like I said, he still hasn't gotten over it. He's come to grips with it now. It's been almost 6 years, but he's still suffering from losing his best friend and really his only friend, pretty much.
Yeah, that can't have been easy for anyone in the family, but especially someone with that close of a relationship.
Yeah, I've just been really lucky to have the spouse that I have because I know, when you get married, it's a roll the dice a lot of times. Nobody gets married thinking I'm going to get divorced in 2 years or whatever. Right. You don't do that. You think you're doing something that's going to make you happy, and for a lot of people it does, but for a lot of people it doesn't. So I've been on both sides of that. It's a lot more fun to be on the side I'm on now, I tell you, and having somebody there that you can tell anything to. I have no secrets. I've been totally open and honest. And if there's one thing that came out of that first experience for me, it was this, that I didn't want to go through it again. And I was going to try my hardest to make sure I didn't. And so, we have arguments, but almost every time we'd have an argument, from the first argument we had maybe 3 months into our marriage, even till now, and I can be really mad sometimes, but within 10 minutes, I'll just go and say, hey, I'm sorry. because it's just not worth it. All I have to do is start to think about all the good qualities that Judy possesses, and it's like, yeah, it just melts away whatever goofy argument we have, because they're almost always goofy arguments anyway.
Yeah. It sounds like y'all have a great relationship.
I think so. I mean, gosh, I tell her all the time, I said, we can't get divorced now, or all those people in the church are going to go, see, that's what happens. They were happy when they were members.
Can't let them be right.
That's right.
Now you're just staying married out of spite. I support doing things out of spite. That's okay.
Yeah, well, we're fortunate. She's actually on her way home tonight. She went up to see Hamilton, that play, that's out there. Yeah. She went up with a couple of girlfriends on Saturday, and they went and saw Hamilton yesterday on the Sabbath. Oh my goodness! But
oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. That, if we're laughing, but that would have been a big no-no as members of the church for sure.
Right. What are some practices or habits that you've developed now that help you maintain your mental health?
Well, I'm 68 years old. So I'll tell you some things I do now that I've never done before. And that is, if I think of something, like I'm out walking, right? I walk 5-6 days a week, listen to podcasts. I will get my phone and I'll put it down in the notes in my phone. Because even though I think I have a pretty good memory, yeah, I'll get back and go, what was I thinking about when I was walking? No. So now I put it down. If I'm going to go to softball and I want to bring a couple of beers for one of my buddies that I know he likes, and I picked them up when I was in Nevada or whatever, I'll leave myself a note and put it on my softball bag and say, here, so that will remind me to get it. So I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about, but I mean, we have a place where we hang our keys up so that we never have to look for keys, right? I mean, so I think that we've just gotten, I would call it just being a little smarter, rather than trusting my memory to always, 100% remember all these little things I think about. Now I just try to either put them in my phone or leave myself a note, and it works for me. So I that's just something I started doing really in just the last couple of years.
Yeah. I've got Post-it notes all over the place with stuff written on them. Like, hey, don't forget to do this, which I did. I did this one today. So sometimes it works, but yeah, I'll either put a message. I have a Discord server that is just me. Like, I'm the only one in it. And I got a channel that says like not related notes. And I'll put in there, hey, don't forget that you want to do this thing, or don't forget to add this. And then I started while I'm cooking dinner. If I run out of something, I yell at my 17-year-old, hey, add sour cream to the grocery list, because he'll go into the Walmart app and just add it right then, because I'm not going to write something down while I'm cooking. I'm not going to remember to go do it later. I'm going to forget to do it. So now I've started using my children.
Yeah, but see, what you're doing is exactly what I'm doing. You're just, as you're thinking about it, you're trying to take care of it then, rather than rely on your memory to remind you to do it later or whatever. So,
Yeah, this brain is full of stuff. I call it a tornado in there, because it's just, maybe it'll come back around whenever that tornado circles, but maybe it won't because it got sucked into some other part. Who knows? But yeah.
Well, I think that, I look at what you're doing. When I decided to do this podcast in 2020, I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't know that I had to get like this Focusrite, I mean, you have to get headphones and microphones, and how do you edit? I edit all my podcasts. I put music in my podcast, so I had to learn how to do that. But you know what? I think as we're getting older, I'm not afraid of technology. I'm not afraid of learning things. And I thank goodness for Reddit, right?
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I use Reddit all the time for everything. We were looking at getting a new car, and I went in and joined a Reddit Kia Telluride group because I was interested in getting a Telluride, and I'd ask all these questions. And anyway, so there's something for everybody in Reddit, as there are podcasts. And you mentioned that earlier.
Sure.
I mean, I don't care what the subject is, softball, surfing, knitting. I guarantee you there's a podcast and there's a Reddit group, 100%.
It's very true. It's very, very true. I am in so many subreddits. I don't even want to count them. It's probably over 100 at this point. But most of the time when I have a technical issue, because I have a lot of technical issues with technology, the answer is someone 8 years ago on Reddit who had a similar issue and posted how they fixed it. And I'm like, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. It just lives on. Just lives on the internet.
One thing I didn't mention, because I mean, our lives are always evolving, they're always changing. I mean, they should be anyway, right? As we learn about new things and whatnot. But my sleeping has really become erratic over the last few years. I don't sleep that well. I sleep for about 5 hours and I wake up. So if I go to bed, let's say I go to bed at 10 o'clock, I'll wake up at 3. Mm-hmm. I used to try and lay there and go back to sleep. Well, now I get up and read. And if I can't go back to sleep, then I'll try and get a nap in if I can or whatever for an hour. I never sleep more than an hour, but now I've just taken to reading. And so I can read a book in 3 days. And so I had somebody reach out to me. I always get people wanting to be on my podcast. So sometimes I'll get things from a publicist and they'll say, oh, I have this great, blah, 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 blah. She just wrote this book, blah, blah, blah. Go send me the book. I'll read it. And so I just read this book by this gal that's going to be on my podcast, and she grew up in Russia, and she's an American now, and her father was murdered. It's actually very interesting. But I read that thing in 3 days, and I sent her a note. I go, all right, I'll put her on. Yeah. Let's schedule something, So, but yeah, so I've done a lot more reading, is what I was just going to say. Mm-hmm. I've always liked to read, but I never really had the time to read when I was, doing the corporate thing, and I traveled so much. I traveled 3 weeks out of the month. I was always on the road somewhere, and I probably had time to read, but I just always felt like I was too busy doing other things. But now I really enjoy reading again. And, whether it's, I just read Killing Lincoln, I read Killing Kennedy, or, so I went through that series of books, but I also like books that are fiction too, mm-hmm. like the James Pattersons and the David Baldaccis and those types of authors. I enjoy those books. They're easy reads. And, but yeah, I just think that, and I'm always learning too. You learn a lot. You learn, mm-hmm. There's this saying, and it's true, you learn more when you're listening than when you're speaking. And it's really true. And so, I think that when you talk about the mental health, I think that for me, I've never been to a therapist in my life, even though I left this high demand religion that could cause people to need therapy. Yeah. I lost a child. I went through a divorce. So I've had reasons to probably go to therapy, but right. I just haven't. But having every 2 weeks, I'll have another interview come out, another podcast. And as I'm talking with these people I'm into my 5th year now, I feel like every time I sit down and talk for an hour with somebody, I've just gone through some therapy, because I've told my story here tonight, and I've had some, some bad breaks, but everybody does. And that's what I was just going to say. As I talk to other people and I interview them and I hear about what's gone on in their life, I think, whoa, I thought I had it bad, so, and it's not that it's a contest on who's, had a rougher life or a rougher go of it. I just think that when you have that verbal exchange and like, I see you, I get you, I'm here for you. And I think that there's some value in that. I think that there's some therapy that comes from that is positive and that is helpful. And so when people say, do you believe in therapy? 100%. I really do.
Yeah. Oh, I stopped being able to hear you. Let's see.
How about now?
Oh, now I can hear you. There we go.
Okay. Sorry. Not sure what happened.
Nope. It was just that very last, whatever you said very last is all I wasn't able to hear.
Well, I was just saying that as a member of the Mormon faith, they did not believe in seeking therapy outside, unless you were going to a Mormon church-approved therapist.
Sure. Well, for obvious reasons, right? You don't want a therapist talking shit about your religion.
Again, I see it now. I didn't see it so much then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing when those blinders come off and you see things for what they really are, but you've got to look. That's what I always tell people. You got to look.
Right. I think, you're talking about your podcast and getting to talk to different people every day, every time. And you have these conversations and it's kind of like therapy for you. And it's, to me, because I do the same thing. I love it. I love talking to people. I love hearing other people's stories. It's why I do this. It's a lot of, I get a lot out of it. I think I probably get out of it more than I give other people sometimes. But it's definitely one of those things of, wow, you've been through so much. That's way more than I've been through. But to me, it's kind of that, and I'm sure it is to you as well, but it's kind of that feeling of, look what they've survived. They're here. They're talking to me. Look at everything they've been through. And we're here having this conversation today. And isn't that amazing? And it's just that hope and that kind of future look, because even if I'm if I'm going through something awful when I'm having that conversation, they might not know that I'm going through something bad, and I might not want to share that at that time, but it just gives you that ability to say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm going to get to the other side of this. I've got 100% survival rate until today. I'm going to continue to have that 100% survival rate. And this person that I'm talking to is too. And nobody knows, like you're talking about, nobody knows what they've been through. Yeah. And you have those conversations, and it's that little bit of hope, that little glimpse, I think.
Well, and like I said, I'm an optimist. So you watch the news, which I try not to watch too much news, because it's just negative story all the time, it seems like. And, politics has become such a divisive thing. I try not to talk politics with anybody. I just believe there's a lot more good in the world than people want us to believe. I mean, I meet people all the time, and whether it's at the grocery store or on the softball field or on the airplane or wherever. And we go on a lot of cruises. And so when you're on a cruise, you see, hey, how's it going? Hey, you see people, and you might sit down next to them. Hey, where are you from? Oh, and people are good. People in general are good. And that gives me hope, because people are like, oh, the world's doomed, climate change. Oh, we're just, whatever. I'm not saying that there aren't problems, but I just choose to believe that there's still a lot more good than bad in this world. And I think that's been borne out through the people I've met on my podcast, for sure.
Yeah. So you started your podcast, Nobody Knows Your Story. And you started it, you said, in 2020, which was a challenging time. How has podcasting impacted your mental health? And is there anything you do around podcasting that supports your mental health? I mean, you just talked about kind of the conversations being a form of therapy, but.
Yeah, I just think that anytime you can exercise your brain, I think that that's good for your mental health. And so when I do a podcast and I finish it, then I go through the editing process, which can be 4 or 5 hours long.
Yeah.
I find songs that I want to put into the podcast, but just going through and knowing where to take out certain words. I'll say a lot. I know I've caught myself saying it tonight on as we've been talking. And I'll take those things out just so that for the listener, it will be smoother and they won't be like picking up on that. Mm-hmm. But I think that doing anything that challenges us mentally is good for our mental health. So whether it's editing a podcast, my wife does a lot of Sudoku, and my mom, who was fearful of Alzheimer's because her mom had it, and her mom had it bad, she would do crosswords and Sudokus and everything. She tutored. I told you she was a school teacher. She tutored until she was like 84 years old.
Wow.
And kept her mind sharp. She was sharp until she passed at 87, and she was sharp right up to the end. So I believe there's value in that. I'm not saying she would have got Alzheimer's if she didn't do all those things. Maybe she wouldn't have got it anyway. But certainly, I believe it kept her mind pretty sharp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right on through. So I kind of saw the value in that. So I'm doing some of those things. I'm not real good at Sudoku like Judy is. Judy she does the hard ones. I do the easy ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's different levels.
So, yeah. I need the introductory levels.
I think it's doing it. You're right. It's just that engaging your brain piece, whether you're doing it on super hard mode. what's the one where you have to make all the different words match up and you put them into categories?
Uh, Wordle.
No, no,
Is that the
no.
Wordle?
No, I'm there. So there is Wordle. I think it might be called Connections. I'm not positive. I haven't played it, but I saw Hank Green talking about it, and he says he plays it on hard mode, and he described what hard mode is for him. And it was incredible. And I'm like, you don't have to do it that way. You can just do it the normal way, and it's still engaging your brain, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll have to look
Yeah,
up what
just like
that
you
one was
say,
called.
just engaging your brain. I think that's the
Yeah.
key right there.
Yeah. Bite Mark says yes, it's Connections. It looks fun. I kind of want to check it out. I don't know if it's on the phone or you have to go to a website or something. There's a website. Look at that. Perfect. All right, I'll check that out. So
I
4
will too.
groups of 4 words it says. And oh no, it's timing me. Close, get out of that. I opened the
Yeah,
website and it
now
said
there's the
timer
pressure.
1, 2. No. All right, I'll check it out later. So, looking back, what advice would you give to someone who may be questioning their faith or who's dealing with a significant loss in their life?
Those are both very serious topics to me. I can actually find some levity in the whole religion thing now. But let me just tell you that when you find out the truth about something that you thought you knew, and then find out that you didn't know, it's devastating. I mean, when I found that out and I realized that I had been lied to, well, that made me angry. But then I started adding up the numbers of dollars I had donated to the church.
Oh,
That made me angry
yeah.
because they don't need the money, and they'll even tell you, "Oh, we don't need the money. This is for you. This is faith promoting for you to do this." Um, so yeah, I mean that was really really hard, and I know people they have had thoughts of why go on living if now I don't have this purpose anymore. So it didn't take me to that level because I had too many other things going on in my life, but it was difficult. It was very difficult. So I don't ever want to. I always have to remind myself that I've been where you are, and so I need to be empathetic to an understanding of what you're going through. Um, and I still have, like I said, most of my family, most of Judy's family are still in the Mormon faith, and so that a lot of times you get together, and that's almost all they don't have other things to talk about many times because they don't do a lot of the things that we do, and so that's difficult because I'd love to tell them what I know, but on the other hand, I know that would probably just maybe drive a wedge, and so you have to be careful sometimes. But yeah, those are tough things, and I just think that if you can be, mentally strong, and for me, it's always, I think part of that is just doing exercise and eating right and having fun, and probably one of the most fun things that Judy and I have done. Sometimes I say things and I think, I am 68, but I don't feel like it, and you hear those things all the time, right? But we discovered silent disco a couple of years ago, and I'm telling you, that is so much fun. And we'll get out there, and of course, there's a little alcohol involved, but I mean, that just makes it more fun. But yeah, we love to. Judy won't dance, and except when we're on cruises, I can get her to dance, But we've always enjoyed dancing and just having fun, and we have friends that we've done things with for over 30 years, and so it's fun to get together with those friends. And we don't even live in the same states anymore, but if we all decide to go on a cruise together, then that's the fun way to do it.
Yeah. Just kind of finding a way to have that creative outlet and get a little bit of fun in your life.
Yeah, I mean, we took 14 of us to the Caribbean this year. Next year, I think right now we're up to 18 of us going out of Barcelona on a different cruise, and And it gives you time just to sit and visit and really get to know people also. And for someone like myself that likes people's stories and just I guess I just like people in general. So it's fun for me to do that. And I like seeing new sites. I've never been to Barcelona, so that'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to we're cruising to Africa and some other places, Morocco and Casablanca, different things like that. So all fun and new. Because people say, gosh, Larry, you and Julie sure do a lot of stuff. I'm like, yeah, because I don't know how many years it'll be before maybe one of us can't, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to do some fun things while we can. So
as you should.
I think that
absolutely.
And remember too, I don't know, right? And I'll tell you that I don't know. This could be our only life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I hope there's something beyond this, but I don't know. And if this is it, I'm going to enjoy it.
Yep. Absolutely. Might as well. One way or another, actually, whether you get another one or not. You might as well enjoy this one.
Yes, 100%. I agree.
What is your favorite life hack?
My favorite life hack? I don't know. I just told you about all my little tricks I use. Remembering things.
That's true. I mean, writing down notes definitely could be a life hack.
I mean, that's probably been the thing I've gone to more recently, just because I mean, I probably am getting more forgetful, right? I mean, I think that happens as we age, but and I have friends that still color their hair and they do these things because I think that just accepting getting older is difficult for some people. It's not difficult for me. And it's funny how I bring a lot of things back to softball, but when you play senior softball, and here's something that's weird, you can play senior softball when you turn 40.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes. My son is 41 and he can play senior softball. So, but what happens is every 5 years, you're in a different grouping. Mm-hmm. So right now I play 65 plus. So you can be older than 65, but you just can't be, I can't play with the 70s. You follow me?
Yeah.
But I could play with the 60s. And we have these senior games here in St. George called the Huntsman Senior Games. And thousands of people come from all over the country to play here. And there's every kind of sport you can imagine, from badminton to bowling to basketball. Well, I play the softball. And sometimes there'll be a team like last year. I played on a team out of Canada. They got here and they had a couple players that couldn't make it. So they asked if any of us could play with them. And so I played with them, and they were young guys. They were 55s. Which is funny, isn't it? When I think of people being young at 55, but it's all relative, right? But so the aging thing, now I was telling my wife, I said, I can't wait till I'm 70 and I'll be the young guy again. So it's kind of funny because every 5 years you're the young guy again. But then now I'm 68. So now I'm playing with guys that are 65 and 66. I got these young guys in here now.
It just constantly shifts as you get older. That's okay.
It constantly does. And I'll tell you, I'm amazed when we go to Vegas here next month, they have 85 division.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing to think that all those guys on that field, and there aren't a lot of teams, I mean, but still, the guys that are playing are all 85 plus. There's guys that are playing that are 90, and it's just, it's amazing to me.
Yep. It's fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah. And these are guys that have had some luck and also probably just taken care of themselves. I'm guessing they've probably been athletic throughout their life. But it does come down to luck a lot of times. I've got friends of mine that would love to still be playing, but they've had a hip replacement or a knee replacement or a shoulder issue, and you get enough of those and you just can't play anymore.
Yeah. Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. If you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
I don't know. I guess, and maybe this isn't going to answer your question the way you mean it, but the thing I just thought of when you're saying that is I think depression is something that, for me, as a person who hasn't really had issues with depression, my son, the one who's battled drugs, I used to say, because he'd be depressed, and I'd say, well, just snap out of it. Come on, man, let's just go for a run or do something. Just snap out of it. it took me years to understand that he wasn't choosing to be depressed.
Yeah.
People that have mental health issues, they don't choose that. It's a chemical imbalance. It's something that they have that I'm fortunate that I don't. But I have to give space for the fact that they do. And I had someone on my podcast who had actually become one of my best friends. He came on the podcast because he wanted to talk about suicide. And he wanted to take the stigma away from it because his grandfather took his life. Mm-hmm. And 20 years later, his father took his life. Mm-hmm. And later, his wife took her life. And that was pretty much what we talked about, because he said, my father was so embarrassed that he was having these depressive issues and thinking suicidal thoughts that he's speaking, he says, when my mother told him, go get some medical help, he wouldn't even get it in the town where he lived. He drove hundreds of miles to another city because he didn't want anybody in his town to know that he was having to meet with somebody because of some depression issues. And when they found him, he had driven off, and they found him after a few days. Sitting on the seat next to him was the medication he had received, and it had never been opened. So he went from that. And I should tell you that my friend also, when he got into his 30s, started having those same thoughts. But he went and got help and sought help. Mm-hmm. And he takes a pill every day now that just kind of keeps him right, is how he explains it. Yeah. And so that's where you can see generationally how that's changed. Grandfather, nothing. Father kind of tried to do something, but didn't, still didn't. And then when it got to him, he sought the help. And now his kids, they've learned from their dad, and now they take some medication for help. So that's what I have learned, is just that we need to give space for people that have some issues and not look at it as a weakness. Mm-hmm. Would I say to you, or would you say to me, if I was a diabetic, that I was weak and that
Exactly.
No, you'd say, oh, you need to make sure you get your insulin shots or whatever it is that you need to do. Maybe it's change your diet, whatever. But we wouldn't look at it as a weakness. We just look at it as something you need to deal with and work with. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And that was what my friend was trying to get across. And that's what I have learned too. Sometimes, it takes me a while to understand things, but I have come to understand that depression, mental health, those are serious things that we need to have empathy for those that have to struggle with those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an issue in your brain, and your brain controls everything. And just because we don't quite understand some of the things that are going on up there doesn't make them less real, less impactful, anything like that.
Right.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time today, Larry. Folks in chat, if you have any other questions, make sure that you pop them in here so we can get them addressed. I am going to share your website and your podcast and your book links one more time, and then I'll just give you the floor for a little bit. If there's anything that we didn't cover or anything you want to share as far as resources or anything like that goes, I'll just let you have it.
We've talked about quite a bit, and those that know me would know that. I mean, they're not surprised. I can talk a lot, and I can talk at length, but I would say that if there's a message that I can get across to anybody that's out there listening, it would just be to realize that there's avenues out there for everything. To not, if you're wondering about something, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I'm watching a TV show and we see something or somebody says something, I will grab my phone and Google it right then. Mm-hmm. And Judy will go, oh, here you go. You got to look it up. I go, yep, you got to look it up. Because we might be watching a show and we might say, hey, wasn't he in, and I go, I can't remember. And then I'll look it up, So I just like knowing stuff. And I know that might seem like, what, who cares? Because that's sometimes other people's response, right? Yeah. Who cares? And that's fine too. It's like concerts. I'll tell people I've been to 180 concerts. My last concert I went to was the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I always wanted to see them, and something always kept me from going. And and they'll be like, I've never been to a concert. Or I'll go on and on about Hawaii, and they're like, yeah, I've never been to Hawaii. And that's okay. And I should say, and then they'll say, and I don't even care if I go to Hawaii, or I don't really have any interest. And I'm like, all right, that's okay. And I think that that's something, again, as I've gotten older, I've kind of learned that it's okay for people to maybe not feel the way I feel about things.
Yeah.
And I just say, it's okay to disagree. Just don't be disagreeable. Because there's a difference.
Ooh, I like that.
And yeah. So that's it. I mean, I would just tell people, just take advantage of the technology that we have, where if you want to know something, it's so easy to find it out now. And through, like we said already, Reddit, the internet, Google, you can find anything if you really want to know. And I'm a big believer in learning stuff and educating yourself and staying up with it. I don't have to know the latest words that the teenagers are using. I'm not talking about that, but I'm just talking about things that at least can help you converse in a conversation at a party or something like that. So you're at least up to date as to what's going on. That kind of stuff is what I'm talking about. At least for me, I like knowing what's going on. So I'm like, what are they talking about?
And we've got little computers in our pockets that we can just look things up on. It's easy to do that. My 10-year-old came into the bathroom before this, because he never leaves me alone, ever. And he asked me some question. I said, I don't know, go ask the robot, because I don't say her name out loud, because then she'll activate. I'm like, I don't know, go ask the robot. And he went and asked the robot and came and told me the answer. I'm like, great, can you please go out of the bathroom now? But it's just, it's one of those things. It's like, we've got the ability. Just ask the question. Look it up on your phone if you need to. All of that. Bite Mark says, I'm that person. I wonder. That's Googleable. And then she just looks it up. That's how it goes,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I do know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, Bite Mark says, thank you so much for being here. I have some more reading to do about the Mormon Church and the Bite model. I love learning new things, and thank you for sharing your story. And I will echo that. Larry, thank you so much for taking the time out, having this conversation. I appreciate your story and sharing it with us.
Hey, my pleasure. And thanks for having me on. It's, as a people person, I enjoy just communicating and talking and sharing and getting a little bit of therapy, which is what I got tonight.
There you go. All right, folks, we'll stick around for just a minute. I will be right back after I disconnect with Larry. And thank you for being here, for listening, for asking questions. All of those things make a huge difference. One more thing, if you do go to Larry's podcast or book links, make sure to like, review, subscribe. Those things help podcasts so much. You have no idea. It's how you get ranked. It's how you get found. All of those things. Anything you can do to click a button on either of those things will be super, super helpful. So make sure to do that and stick around. I'll be right back. And that wraps up my conversation with Larry Camp. I hope his story resonated with you. Larry shared so much about the challenges of navigating life, religion, and loss, and how stepping away from something as deeply ingrained as his faith impacted his mental health and sense of self. What really stuck with me was his honesty about the guilt and pressure he felt growing up in a high-demand religion, and how leaving it behind gave him a chance to heal and live more authentically. But I think the biggest takeaway is that healing and self-discovery look different for everyone. Whether you're working through big questions about your faith or just trying to find a balance between your own needs and the expectations of others, there's no one right path. So how does this apply to everyday life? For starters, it's a reminder that you don't have to stay in spaces that hurt you or make you feel less than. Whether that's a religious institution, a relationship, or any situation where you feel you can't be yourself, it's okay to walk away, and it's okay to question, and it's okay to start over. It's also a reminder to give yourself grace. Like Larry said, we can't go back and change the past, but we can choose to do better going forward. Whether that's letting go of guilt, seeking out supportive communities, or just showing up for yourself in small ways every day, progress is always possible. If Larry's story sparked anything for you, whether it's a new perspective, a question, or even just a bit of comfort, I would love to hear from you. Send me a message, drop a comment wherever you're listening, or share your thoughts in a review. Let's keep this conversation going because your experiences and insights matter. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate if you could like, subscribe, and leave a review or rating wherever you're listening. It helps the podcast reach more people and, more importantly, helps me continue to build this incredible community of real, open, and supportive conversations. Thank you for spending this time with me and Larry today. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're questioning, healing, or thriving, you are not alone. I'll see you next time on Even Tacos Fall Apart. Take care.